You lack priorities, not information. Problems are easy to solve if you know what you're after, if you know what problem you're actually trying to solve. I'll tell you a story. So I was talking to an entrepreneur who's doing about 10 million a year, and that was between all of his companies. And we were talking, and they mentioned one, and then he mentioned a second, they mentioned a third, they mentioned a fourth. I was like, dude, how many companies do you have? And he's like, oh, I don't know. I was like, you don't know? He's like, yeah, I have an Excel sheet. And so I was like, well, pull it up. And so he pulled up his Excel sheet, and he had like 56 companies that in total were making like $10 million a year. And obviously one of them was the biggest one that was doing like half of that revenue. And that was actually the company that I had heard of that he founded. And I said, dude, if you just only had that one company, how easy would it be to like 5X that business? He was like, oh my God, if I didn't have these other 55 companies, it'd be a joke. I was like, so if I waved a magic wand and that happened, you think you could do it? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, then do it. You can wave the magic wand. You can end these other 55 partnerships so that you can do this one thing. And what's crazy is that a year later, I talked to him and he had done just that. He was like, dude, I like didn't sleep for 3 days after we talked because I was like, oh my God, that's it. So I see strategy as priority. It's prioritization of resources, right? You have unlimited options, but you have limited resources, time, money, people, etc. And so how you choose to allocate those resources against the unlimited options is your strategy. It is how you prioritize. And when you have one clear goal for one clear company, for one clear customer, the prioritization actually gets pretty easy. And so a lot of people keep looking for these unique insights when the reality is you don't even have a goal. Have you defined the problem that you're trying to solve? And most people haven't. And that ends up being usually the first question I ask someone. They're like, hey, I'm stuck with my business. And I just say, well, what's the goal? And then they say something. I say, well, what problem are you solving right now? And so if you can't clearly state current state, desired state, obstacle, you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off. You're not going to solve anything. You're going to do a lot of work, but you're not going to move forward. So I had a media company approach me. They've got 40 million subscribers across their channels, obviously very, very good at media. They said, hey, we've been listening to your content and we think that our constraint, like the problem that we need to solve that will get us the most bang for the buck, is that we need to optimize our SOPs for the media company. I said, okay, well, what's the goal? I was like, is it to just get more famous or is it to make money? And they're like, no, we want to shift into monetization now. I was like, okay. So let me ask you this, what product do you sell? And they were like, well, we don't have a product. I was like, okay. So hear me out, crazy idea. If you had a product, you would make a lot more money than trying to get your 97 out of 100 media company to 98.5. Not to say that there's nothing, like if they said, I want to be more famous, then I would have said, absolutely, you should do that. That makes sense because monetization isn't the goal. But if they were trying to make money, they had nothing to sell. And I promise you, if you have nothing to sell, you make a lot less money than if you do have something to sell. And so they could be a 2 out of 10 on product, but with that amount of media, that amount of traffic, they would be able to get so many sales that they would blow it out of the water. And so they were spending all this time trying to get into the intricacies, trying to get information on how to solve the wrong problem. And so most times it's not that you lack insight, it's that you're solving the wrong thing. And I think the reason that happens so frequently is because those entrepreneurs are media entrepreneurs. They like media. They feel comfortable in media. And so they like solving media problems. And so they like solving problems that they know how to solve because they've solved them before. I'll tell you a different story. I had a guy who came out for a workshop here at acquisition.com, and he said, hey, can you go over the closer framework? And I said, okay, you flew across the country. You've been here for a day. You had this one opportunity to ask this question to me. I was like, is sales a problem in your business? What's your close rate? He said 40%. I said, so sales is not the constraint of your business. He was like, no. I was like, then why are you asking me about the closer framework? And I actually think that lesson was way more powerful than me trying to go over the closer framework, because the reality is he was a sales guy. He loves selling. And so he wanted to hear me talk about sales, but sales isn't the problem in his business. There's something else that's the problem. He might not be getting enough leads, or people are churning out too quickly on the back end, or he can't even take on more customers because he doesn't have enough team. Like, those are all other examples of problems that might exist. And I'll bet you one of those 3 probably is the problem in his business, but that wasn't the question he asked. He asked about the thing that he enjoyed reading about, the thing he enjoyed learning about. And so right now, if you're an entrepreneur, it is true that you want to double down on your strengths, but the business as a whole has to be balanced. So hear me out. If you think about business like a body, okay? And you're a bodybuilder, and so you want to have ideal ratios for everything. In terms of, like, if your arms were like this big and your quads were tiny, then you look weird, right? So you want to be a specialist. Like, you, sure, as an individual contributor, keep doubling down on your strengths. but the business as a whole will only be as strong as its weakest link. And so this is where people get confused with double down on your strength versus be well balanced. The business needs to be balanced. Your physique in total needs to be balanced. But you as an individual contributor can double down on your strengths. You want a team of people who are all doubling down on their strengths, but you as the organizer of the business need to make sure that the business as a whole is balanced. Otherwise, it will get constrained at some point, and then that point will be your point of failure. That will be the weak link. That will be the part of the bridge where only $1 can get across, even though you've got 10x the front end and 10x the back end. That one bottleneck is what's bottlenecking the business. And so making sure that oftentimes the thing that you're not the most excited about, if you're a marketing entrepreneur, marketing is probably not your problem. If you're a product-driven entrepreneur, product's probably not your problem. If you hate people, and that's probably your issue. Like, I hate meetings, I hate leading people, I hate trying to reinvest my team. I'll bet you that you probably are having limits on your business because you don't know how to recruit, hire, train, manage. And so that's actually what you need to either learn or recruit someone who already knows how to do that. And so people spend too much time mentally masturbating to the concepts that they love in the idea that because it worked to get them to where they're at, because they needed to start marketing to make money, they think, okay, now if I 10x marketing, that's what it takes to make more money. And unless that's the constraint, that's not true. And oftentimes businesses do grow to the constraint of the founder. They do grow to the constraint of that individual founder's highly specialized skill. And then at that point, it's constrained with something else that the founder doesn't like as much. And so either you got to learn it and get comfortable learning stuff that you don't like as much initially, or you got to find someone who does. And so if you're like, okay, well, I'm either a product entrepreneur and I need more marketing, or I'm a marketing entrepreneur and I need more product, or I'm either of those things and we don't have an operator, we have somebody who likes to lead and manage people and invest in teams, then how do you know what good looks like? So first off, one of the biggest advantages of business of doing this for a while is you start to recognize patterns. So you hire 5 guys that suck and then finally find a 6th, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, so this is what a good sales director looks like. This is why the businesses, for example, that we start now grow so much faster, because 1, we know who's going to be needed next, and 2, we know what that person looks like. And so think about how much time you save where if the constraint, let's say, is sales, and you hire onboard train and that takes a month, and then that person sucks and it takes you 6 months to fire them, and then you do it again, and that takes another 6 months to fire them, and you do it again, and then this time it works. Well, you just wasted a year and change of growth that you should have been growing, but you weren't because you're the wrong person at the point of constraint. And realistically, this is why so many businesses get stuck. And the wrong conclusion is the person says, oh, I tried hiring sales directors. That doesn't work. No, you tried hiring John, and John sucked. It doesn't mean that there is no sales director. It doesn't mean you're the special snowflake that no one can ever replace you, or that no one can do this role. It's just that you can't. Like, there's Microsoft, there's Facebook, there are gajillion-dollar companies. Someone out there on earth is better than you literally at the thing that you're best at, and definitely better than the thing that you suck at. Now, how do you actually tactically find these people when you don't have the experience? So I'll give you the tactics how I think about this. 1 is I interview lots of people. And so if you think about the interview process as an education process, in asking them as much as you possibly can, act like an ignoramus. Just be like, I don't know anything about this. Tell me about it. And then don't then immediately jump on the first person. Go on 10 dates, go on 20 dates. I'll give you a little sideline story. For Skool, Sam, the founder, interviewed 600 developers before he found his co-founder. 600. And the way that he did that is the process that I'm outlining. So first he said, hey, who here knows anything about development in his network? So he started interviewing those developers. And then he said, hey, can you introduce me to the best developers you know? And so then those people introduced him because they had a better context. He's like, I'm not hiring any of you. I want to know the best people you know. And so eventually he kept going up the ladder of, he talked to those people and say, who's the best one you know? And he kept going up and kept going up, only to fact find, only to find information, until he found somebody who was like, oh my gosh, this guy said more things and made more sense. And at this point in the process, he'd already spoken to so many people, he had a good context from which to make a judgment. And so that is the process. I will tell you what I personally look for now. I look for the quantity and quality of metrics that someone has to describe their role. And so I'll give you a binary example. So on one hand, if I was hiring someone for customer success, let's say that's like you're getting a lot of churn, you're not getting a lot of ascensions, you're not getting good reviews, your NPS scores are low, et cetera. You're then saying, okay, Mr. Customer Success candidate, tell me about customer success. What metrics do you measure? Now, if they say like, I just want to make sure people are happy, that they're having a good, they're good time, and that they're getting results and they're having a good experience, I'd be like, cool, well, what do you measure? And if they start squirming around like, well, what do you measure? And they can only come up with 1 or 2 things, then I already know that this person obviously can't drive an outcome because they can't even define an outcome. Now, on the flip side, if that person says, okay, well, we like to define an activation metric up front that we can do within the first 48 hours. Then we have like, what is our time to value and what's our North Star there? We also like to measure CSAT, but I don't like to do it too often because then customers don't like filling out the surveys. And so we want to make sure that we can do it ideally within the customer journey during a value-driven exchange that they're going to have with a customer service rep or some sort of account rep that they have to manage, and then we can just tack it into that process. I like to look at churn, but churn I see more as a lagging indicator. And I look at these other things, especially what's our time, like how long does it take from sale to onboarding? What's that handoff look like? What percentage of customers are backing out in the first 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours? And what percentage of these customers are leaving us a review by day 30? And so all of a sudden I'm like, okay, well, he just said like 9 different metrics and had reasoning for that. And so then the follow-up to this question of understanding the quality and quantity of the metrics that someone's going to bring to the table is awesome. Like, this is going to freak some people out. How does what you do make the business money? And if the person cannot accurately describe how they're functioning, because every function of a business makes a business money. That's why the function exists. Now, the thing is that some functions of a business are indirect versus direct. So if I asked a CFO, how do you make the business money? They should say multiple things. Well, one, I control expenses. So everything that I save goes to the bottom line, and I have a process of consistently cutting out excess costs every 30 days. And so by doing that, I can usually drive an extra 3 to 5% to the bottom line, which more than pays for me. So I'm like, okay, great. They're already even thinking about my return as an owner versus them. On top of that, they say, okay, also, I see finance really as a function of decision-making. And so if we can collect the metrics that drive decisions around what things have the highest gross margins, what's our utilization rates, how can we make the decisions that will get us the highest return on capital, both human and money capital in the business, then we will grow faster. And so if someone talks like that, then I'm like, okay, they understand how finance is actually a data function. By the way, it is. Literally, that's what finance does. This gives you reports, it's reporting, so that you can make decisions about the business so that we make more money. Cool. Now, sales is going to say like, and I'll give you an example for a sales director. So if I say, hey, how does what you do make us more money? Now, if they say, well, I'm gonna drive sales, I'd be like, well, duh. But like, you're not going to sell anyone because you're a director. So how do you make the company more money? What you want them to say is that I'm going to increase the average conversion percentage across our leads for the team, because that is the output of the sales manager is closing percentage. Like at a fundamental rate, it's closing percentage is one of the metrics, but just total conversion rate of leads. So if I get 100 leads and there's lots of mini steps, you got to schedule, you got to show, you got to close, you got to offer, whatever, there's cash collected, there's other mini metrics along the way, but you just want to see what percentage of eyeballs and or earballs and people who give us their information we can contact, do we convert into sales? And if you say, I, as a sales director, will be able to increase that percentage, then that's the job. And that's how I make the business more money. Because here's the thing, if they cannot describe an output of their job that ties to revenue for the business or ties to profit for the business, then you can be absolutely certain that they don't know how to do it and that they're not going to do it for you because they can't even tell you how it works. And so I use those as the litmus test. 1, I interview as many people as I possibly can so I can get a basis from which to make a judgment. 2, from there, I'll learn the metrics because I won't know them, that people use to describe the role to drive outcomes. And I will look for the quantity and quality of metrics that people will track and what they would do to influence those metrics, step 2. And then step 3, how does what you do make the company more money? Don't let them get away with like the sales example, well, we're going to make more sales. No, but how do you influence that?